I'm Dana Herz, and I am here on Magician's Workshop.
Dana Herz has always loved performing. She grew up in a show business family that filled their home with a steady stream of entertainers. Today, with her interactive and mind-blowing magic, mentalism, and humor, she brings a contagious energy as well as laughter to every event. She's a regular for corporate groups and is often sought after for fundraisers, clubs, and private parties. Welcome to the show, Dana Herz. Woo!
All right, that was less bad than I thought it might be.
I want to hear, why did you think it would be bad?
I don't know. It's just bios feel very
Aggrandizing.
I mean, I think that I have been in the magic world like my whole life. I know how full of it all magicians tend to be. And I think people kind of get in this trap of like hearing it, but I think or like believing their own bios and everything like that. And people put so much stress and pressure into them when really at the end of the day it's like, do the people like your personality and do you do good magic? So yeah. I think the bios, they're great support, but it doesn't really tell you much about a person.
I do want to talk about you specifically, your company, Magicorp Productions, which is the largest consulting agency in the world that specializes in magic, illusions, and variety arts. Is that?
It's almost like you just made that up perfectly. Yeah, that does cover it.
Okay.
Do you want me to like tell you like kind of like how the company started and stuff like that?
Yeah, let's do that part 2. I want to talk about you first, and then I want to get a little bit of your perspective in magic, and then I want to go and talk a lot about that company, which I think is a super cool idea. I mean, I fix teeth. I'd much rather sign artists.
But you will appreciate my dad back in the day with my mom actually had a whole magic kit just for dentists.
What?
Like, they went to a dental convention, and it was like, yeah, okay, I'll have him. It was a whole that was their whole.
I'm gonna have to hear about this.
Yeah,
that sounds amazing.
I don't know how much, but I remember my mom was being used because it was like demonstrative that anyone could do it because she's like never performed any magic. So it was like, oh, see, even you, Mr. Dentist, can do it, or Miss Dentist, can do it. And so, yeah, they had, because it was kind of like in the idea of how I assume, like you try to make the whole environment something.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just, a way to kind of ease the tension.
Oh my God, that's exactly what I do. And that's how I got into magic. I ran into a magic dentist in Chicago, and I loved what he did. And I was really, really anxious about doing dentistry because I was only a year out and I really hated everything about it. Once I started doing magic tricks for people, I mean, it was like night and day, and my life got so much better. That's amazing that he had an idea. Oh,
it was like exactly like that. Like that's still an idea that he references as one that was like a great idea that just like didn't take off.
I feel like there's still some legs there. I feel like
there's a lot of legs in a lot of that's kind of why we end up doing a lot of projects is like I think a lot of people have such a limited kind of view of where magic can fit. And what I think from my family have seen is like, I really enjoy finding how magic can fit in non-magical settings. So like, I like being the magic addition rather than have it all be about me kind of. Cause I do like to have kind of a participatory role as much as it is that the like spotlight is on me. It's like, I want it to feel like a collective, even though I understand that I'm the one performing.
I got it. So you want to be inclusive, when you're performing. Yeah.
And I think that's also why I tend to lean towards, I have a stage mentalism show, but I really like close up and parlor stuff just because my favorite part of the whole thing is the interaction. And I think the tricks are kind of secondary. I think trick selection is just as important as personality, but I think that like the actual abilities they're very important, but in line with the trick selection, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I'm making notes because I want to come back to how you specifically look for tricks, because that's something that I always have a hard time with. I've got like a million different tricks that go in a drawer, and I don't know if I knew a little bit more about how to pick them for me, that would probably save me a ton of money over time.
Yeah. Absolutely. But but be rest assured that we've all spent like stupid money on things that we will never touch.
what it,
Absolutely.
what
I
it,
like
what
thinking about things and I'm like, eh.
what is your biggest regret buying?
Okay, well, they're not regrets because I think they're bad tricks. They're like regrets because um it doesn't fit for me. I would say. Like I think that some people do it really well. I have this phantom bell that just does not work with my personality. I don't do kind of supernatural stuff. And so when I tried to sell it, I couldn't believe it. Same reason as I
Mm.
can't really sell anything that has tarot. Because I kind of walk the line of like I could do a great big tarot reading, but I think it's a little too important to a lot of people.
Oh,
I don't want
okay.
to start crossing into like imposing on whatever helps them get through the day because I have a strong opinion about psychics. Um, but I also think that if it's just a validating source in your life, it can be okay as long as it's not creating this need that's like you wouldn't have these answers or these opportunities if I weren't there. So
Right.
people will always ask me like, "What do you think of psychics?" And I'll kind of try to ask first, "Well, what is your relationship with psychics?" Because I don't want to, and I'll tell them, and they're like, "No, no, no, I want to know what you think." I'll tell them, and then always it ends with, "Yeah, but my psychic."
Mm.
And you're just like,
Hmm.
"Okay, yeah," and
Yeah.
and if that's what gets you through, like it's better than a lot of things.
Yeah, and you're not going to change their mind,
No,
about.
I'm not
So
gonna
I
try.
mean, yeah, you don't want to.
I'm not gonna like tell them like, "Here's the ways that it could work." Like, I mean, sometimes I'll get
Yeah,
into cold reading a little bit, but that's really the extent.
I think it's important for everyone to understand cold reading.
I
So
do.
I think that would keep you out of a lot of trouble.
I mean, I think it'll keep you out of a lot of trouble, but I also think that it's really demonstrative of how much more similar we are than we are, how much more alike
Mm,
we are than we are different. Um,
absolutely.
in a way that cold reading is such a simple concept, but it is really demonstrative of the fact that like there is a finite amount of emotions and experiences, even though they can kind of be tangled in all different ways. Different experiences will invoke the same emotions in different people, and that is a finite thing. And I think the more that people are vulnerable, they see those kind of connections, and that's kind of what cold reading allows.
Yeah. Let's get some more into you. So this is probably a loaded question. Like, what is your earliest memory of magic?
It's kind of definitely blurred. I haven't ever had a life without it being such a dominant part, and it's taken until the last 2 years for me to realize kind of that the people I'm surrounded with, have been surrounded with, are not. It's not a normal upbringing because I didn't really know it, but I met a magician who I really like. His name is Matthew Teague. I don't think enough people know him, so I just like to bring him up. He's
Yeah,
an
plug them.
incredible close up. I mean, incredible performance, but just has such a gentle nature that's also really engaging. And I just think everyone should be a fan. But I kind of will bring up names to him and stuff like that. Stories from when we were childhood with like, say David Williamson. I was telling him who's for anyone that's not a kind of someone that a lot of people look up to, one of the best showmen ever. And I'm like, yeah, me and Ben, his son, would just hang out in the hotel while our dads would do shows in the ballroom downstairs. And I didn't realize that like everyone doesn't have this magic community around them. So the reason I actually call myself a mentalist is because, well, one, I think people already have a perception with magic, so it kind of just lets me get around that and define it for myself. Um, but also because I never got to experience. Most people get into magic because they had an experience that wowed them. They saw a show that was incredible. I only really ever saw it from the backside.
Mm.
So I needed to kind of back up and understand how and why we're tricked. Because I still
Okay.
get to the point now where I'll do a trick and kind of stand there and be like, no, that couldn't have fooled you. And it's not in like a pandering way. It's like I really can't conceptualize how that could trick someone. So I think that that's when I started, because it's just all I've ever been around. That's when I started kind of understanding how cool it was when I kind of took a step back and tried to see it through other people's eyes.
When did you decide to take a step back? Like where in your journey did you decide like I got to see how this is done or
I
how
mean,
people perceive it?
I came back and forth. I think I've always been really interested in psychology and how that works. I kind of always was more interested in that end of it. Like I love everything with scams and everything like that. I came in and out of it growing up. I mean, I got my allowance going to the Society of Young Magicians in Stamford, Connecticut, where Ryan Oakes was the cooler older kid. He's a great magician. I don't. I've like always wanted to tell him. I was like, "You're the kid," but I've never told him that. Maybe I have. But I don't know. Ryan, you were so cool. Still are. And so I did that as growing up, but I did always feel like I didn't belong. Like combination of being the daughter and being a female was just I was in the room, but I didn't feel like I was part of the room kind of. So I did pull back for a while in college. I did just stand up. And at that point I found that the part that I really enjoyed the most was the guest interaction or the audience interaction. And I found that the thing I'm probably best at is crowd work. And at the same time, most crowd work, if done in the way that I would do it, would leave somebody feeling a little bit worse, even if it wasn't intentional. And I just like hated the idea that anyone would leave feeling a little bit worse. So I found that introducing a little bit of magic allowed me to have that interaction while still having the comedy piece and then having everybody leave in a better place. I mean, unless you're being a jerk, and then I will make you feel not great, but that's on you.
Hecklers be damned.
It's like hecklers are okay sometimes because they're at least engaged. It's
Mm.
more of the just like rude for the sake of it and not paying attention.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I did stand up. Then I decided like let's give it a shot at in television because I've been around live entertainment. Why not?
I like how casually you're just. I'm just gonna go into television. Why not?
I mean, I was studying, and so the school I went to, you do like 6 months school, 6 months full time work.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
cool.
so I did a 6 month stint at the Maury Povich show, and that I know
I love that show. It's a guilty pleasure.
It was like the most immoral thing I've ever been a part of. We would only put Red Bull and sodas in the adults' room, and then we would go in, like a senior producer would go into each and be like, you should hear what they're saying about you. Like they are just like, they're making stuff up while they're just like on Red Bull. I bought so many cubic zirconium rings from Target for people to propose on stage. So after I did that, I was like, I'm done with TV. I don't like TV. Cool, I tried it. But I went out to LA. I got a job in production. I did street magic in Santa Monica for a while. And then I got a job in production on the Ellen show. And so I was there for a bit. And that kind of just confirmed for me that no thank you for TV. And then I became a tour manager for a magician. And kind of just was like, all right, you know what? LA, that whole scene is just, it doesn't work for me at all. So I ran away to the mountains of northern Arizona for 2 years to become a candle carver because I just needed to get away. So why not Sedona and Flagstaff? And then I decided I needed to come back and like re-engage with the world a bit. And so when I came back, it was actually right when COVID kind of was starting. Like I moved to San Diego a month before COVID started.
Oh.
And so it was kind of weird because I was in this in-between state of doing some performing, but not a ton. And I found everybody was creating these virtual shows, and anyone I was invited to, I was like, this is boring. And it's not because the magician wasn't engaging. That's not like a style I think, to me, magic is a live art form. And I appreciate all of the magic on TV and everything, but I do feel like in the end it is meant to be enjoyed like interpersonally. And so I was like, how do we create an engaging experience? And so I started with my friend who's a comedian. We called it Magic Happy Hour. And so the idea was, first of all, I was like, I don't want to build a set. Like some of my friends, like Tom Pichet, he built such a cool set, but I was lazy with it. And I tend to like to lead with like, if the magic's good, then we don't need to worry about the other stuff. It might be a lazy mentality, but it's how I work.
I feel you. I understand 100%.
I'm just like, if the cards and everything is great, like we don't need the rest. That's also my style. Like, I won't perform with anything that doesn't look like something you could find in your house. Like, that's just a rule across the board for me. Um, but so I realized we needed to feel fully engaged. So we called it Magic Happy Hour, and it was half performing, half teaching. And it was supposed to be like from my living room to yours. But what I would do is I would introduce a concept such as misdirection. And then I would say, I'm about to do a trick. Just know that what I'm going to do is using misdirection. You're not going to see it, but that is what I'm going to use. And then I would teach a trick using that concept.
Cool.
And so it was really cool because everybody then got to go home and show whoever, I mean, not go home, they were home, but like they got to go to the other room and show whoever they were with, three new tricks. And it was a cool, engaging way. And they were all ones that could be done over Zoom, and could be integrated into meetings and stuff like that. So that actually felt to me like kind of a turning point where I was just like, the more people get a little bit of a taste of the behind the scenes, the more engaged they get in what you're doing. And if I know, some people kind of are like, doesn't that ruin, the mystery, the magic behind it? And I think it really does the opposite. And just like any magician who has like seen a little bit, it just sparks an interest and an excitement that makes them so much more engaged. So for me, that was kind of like when things I feel like shifted, because it was when I was like, oh, the experience is really so much more important than the technical magic. And I mean, I do believe that your magic technically should be great, but like, I don't really care if like my pass isn't perfect. I mean, it is, but I don't have. No, I'm kidding.
I hope so.
But yeah, I think that's where I sometimes differ from other magicians is how much I think it's personality and trick decision based, which I think we can see in so many of our favorite magicians. I mean, if you look at Matt King, it's like he knows the tricks that work for him. He has the best, character and personality. And there are tricks that have stayed in his routine because they are so innately his. And so I think that's kind of an example of it really, I mean, that leads. Like we've all seen, I feel like a lot of the magicians who are so technically great and boring, so boring to watch.
Yeah, I would agree. Matt King is a perfect example of just having everything he does is amazing.
Yeah. So we represent him for actually pretty much any shows outside of Las Vegas. His act is a really good example of the need to kind of develop the character. Because if you were to take a kind of just a little 2 minutes out of his thing and you didn't know the character, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. Whereas you see a lot of the AGT types and what they have is 2 strong minutes and they don't have the whole character. So it's like, in a lot of ways, those are really great moments, but the actual great shows are those like sustained characters who have created kind of a whole longer established dynamic.
So is that one of the secrets to long-term success? Like if you're going to have a long-running show like him, is the character really important?
I think it depends what your goal is. I think for Vegas, that really helps, but it depends who your audience is. I don't know that like a character would work. I don't know that Mac's character would have the same kind of greatness and success at a slick New York place. And that's because he knows his audiences and everything like that. And I think a character is one direction you can go. And I think another direction is to really lean into an exaggerated version of who you are, which I think is what Mac does. But he goes really far to that and really commits. And I mean, that's what makes I think more than having the character, it's really committing to whatever it is you decide your representation is going to be, like fully going wholeheartedly. I mean, another back to David Williamson. It's like he leaves it all on the stage. And I think just those people that, and those are the ones that kind of stick out, the ones that have left their shit. I don't want to say left their shame behind, but really left everything they have out there for people to take or leave. And I realize that I end up just like in my normal life, just talking a lot and talking in circles. So I'm trying to avoid that.
So actually, that's what I want. I'm not speak whatever. Yeah. So again, thank you for your taking.
I was excited to do this because I saw Rachel Wax had done that, and we did a show earlier this year, And she's just a great, I just think she's a great magician. She's a great
She's so
example
great.
of you can kind of like what I was saying is you can fully be yourself, but you
Yeah.
need to just commit to that.
Yeah, she's like an exaggerated version of herself, like you were saying, and that works really well for her. That's the hardest I've ever laughed at a Penn and Teller episode. Who you would think would have a huge ego, but actually does not.
I mean, the other way is easy, but won't start naming egos.
Yeah,
Um,
don't no giveaways. But is there
I
anyone who you're like,
don't
obviously
know.
they would just not be approachable, but they're actually like the nicest human being?
I mean, I would say Zabrecki is like one of the nicest people ever. I don't know that he seems it, but his character, if you didn't know him personally, seems a
Uh,
little dark and scary,
yeah.
and I don't think there's anyone sweeter.
Okay, so yeah, go back to if you don't know who Zabrecki is, go back and watch the Carissa episode. Carissa Hendricks, she talks all about Zabrecki.
And I mean, to me, Zabrecki is such a good example, again, of the importance of character, because I feel like he's put a lot more work into figuring out who his character is over the years, and the magic is an incredible support for that. But it only works because of how in line it is. So when other people try to do tricks that he kind of masters and stuff like that, it can feel out of place because it's so innately him. Um, it reminds me of something years ago. I remember Patton Oswalt saying, "Do you get mad or anything when people steal your trick? I mean, steal your jokes?" And he was like, "I mean, I write jokes that wouldn't sound right coming out of anybody else." And that I thought was really interesting because I'm not really ever scared of anyone taking my material, whatever, because I know how to deliver it. But so so back to the other, but so I think Zabrecki is incredibly humble. I mean, Matt, all of the kind of top guys are. I think it's always the ones that are like striving to prove that they're good enough that have the bigger egos. The ones who are really confident in their career. I think more than ego is people would be surprised how many of the top names regularly get very nervous. Because I'll talk to a lot of younger magicians and stuff like that, and they look at them, and I'm like, I just was talking to one of them right before their show, and they were doing breathing, like exercises. So I think more than not a lot of ego is how much doubt there still is in even the top guys and girls.
Wow, I would never have expected that.
Yeah. I mean, I think magic really calls on people who tend to be kind of insecure because it is a
Hmm.
communication method that allows for bonding and communication without a lot of actual interpersonal skills.
Get out of my head. Wow, that's the craziest, most accurate thing I've ever heard anyone say about my life, and it bothers me that it's so obvious.
I mean, I think you're killing it socially. I think you're so good.
You
And I
you
think
have ooh.
I think it was Derek Hughes. I think it was his joke where he said, another great comedy magician for anyone, is last. I think this was his line. Last kid around the track and gym is the first to get a magic kit for Christmas. And it's
get
just like,
get out of my head, Derek Hughes.
yeah, that's correct. So I think that's why there can be kind of a disconnect a lot of times. And I think a lot of, I kind of, back to Rachel, I think we're kind of similar in the sense that we both grew up in families that had magic and we didn't find it. So I think we kind of lead with our personalities because we know the magic didn't kind of come from an obsession with magic. It came from somebody that we love or people we love kind of like infusing magic into our lives. I don't want to speak for her, but
I
I
I
see
I
similarities.
that definitely tracks. Let's pivot. What inspired the creation of the company Magicorp?
So Magicorp,
Corp.
and it's
Magicorp.
because it's like really based in corporate. So my parents started Magicorp in the 1900s. No, in the 90s. My mom's background, she was part of the team that started Comedy Central. And then my dad.
That's super dope, by the way. It's my favorite channel of all time, next to the Food Network.
It's a fun shadow to live in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm not going to be starting Comedy Central. Let's be honest. And then so she had like the business sense, whereas my dad has business sense, but not in the kind of keeping financials and all of that. Like my mom has the business school thing, whereas my dad, um, he kind of really started his career with understanding the experiential. So basically, from really early on, he's this weird combination. Like, my dad is an anomaly. In case he watches this, I'm not going to talk him up too much because I don't want his ego to get too big. Um, Bill.
What?
But
How did he get started in
so
magic?
he's been doing it. He kind of he got a kit for when he was 7, and then he would travel with his friend Paul Cummins, who was an incredible sleight of hand magician. They grew up together. He unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But they traveled, and then my dad kind of did magic all growing up. He ended up doing it through college, really was fully engaged, and then went to grad school for restaurant and hotel and restaurant management at Cornell because he wanted to open a magic restaurant. And then decided he didn't want to actually have the restaurant. He just wanted magic.
Yeah.
So,
Good call.
yeah, he's like, wait, now I have to work with other people and have a thing? No, thank you. But so he started just doing magic like everybody, but pretty quickly realized that people really wanted to cheer for people in their company. And he's always been corporate focused. You know, it's like corporate. I've been to more corporate ballrooms than like anyone should ever have to go to in their lives. Ballroom B is like where I grew up. But started creating his illusions. So he did a lot more illusions back in the day, and he actually built a bunch of them to fit executives. So an assistant would go in, and then an executive would come out. And it was really successful because everybody wanted to appear. But then at one point, he did it with Bill Gates and ended up on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. And so at that point, he had more business than he could possibly, use or do himself. And he realized that when they would call him and he wasn't available, they would then move on and find another magician. And the problem with magic is there's a lot of really great magic, but there's even more bad magic. And people didn't really stop to think, especially event planners, like, what is the difference? What makes someone a good magician? What would make it good for the group? And he found that when an event planner would go on to the next magician, often they would bring them in and they'd have a bad experience and say, okay, we don't like magic. And that's not something you would do with any other art form. I mean, if you had a bad band or a bad singer one year, you wouldn't be like, all right, we're good on music. You'd be like, that was a bad band. So he was like, if we can control the quality that's going out, they're going to come back time and time again. So he kind of just started by, filling those slots with the people, but being a really good people person and having a lot of friends, he really was able to build just a huge network of event planners and companies and DNCs and everything who started seeing magic not just as an option, but turning to him as a kind of solution for how magic could be incorporated into all sorts of events, both interactive, performatively, all sorts of ways.
So he started out using his connections to get people to fill those roles. Did he find that, was it easy if he wasn't available? Was it easy for him to just say, oh, I've got another guy, or would they have to pitch themselves? How would he decide who gets what?
So he handles all of the pitches. I'm doing some of it now, but he would really takes on each event myopically in terms of the fact that he doesn't one size does not fit all. There are a lot of magicians that are the absolute best and aren't right for corporate groups. There are ones that are great for kind of like macho men. I mean, the difference in what I've seen between audiences, like the difference in bankers and tech guys, what I can get away with saying, the points that I can hit them on. I mean, so much of it is so much of the interpersonal psychology. And I think that he's been able to understand what each performer brings to the table, where their strengths are, and using that could fill it in for each group. And I think because he was good at it, it got to the point where most event planners, and still this is the case, often won't even look. Often he'll send, 4 or 5 videos, but it also often is like, you know what, this is who should do it, and they understand he has the um expertise that just this person will fit right for this.
Wow. I'm sure when he started out, it was a lot of people he knew already. But as time goes on, how do you get more magicians on your roster? Do they come to you and apply, or do you reach out to them? How
So
does
it's
that work?
combo. The roster is kept pretty small because kind of the belief the roster is completely exclusive. So a lot of the people we book are not on the roster, but the roster will always be the first people pushed. So if an event comes in and they need 3 magicians, we're going to pitch 3 from that roster. However, if something comes in and they're looking for something really specific and we know of a magician that would be a great fit, like we're always going to bring that person in. But we always want to make sure that we can provide enough work. And so if you're a magician who doesn't have the right voice or the right message or the right feel for corporate, it's in no way indicative of your quality as a magician, just whether or not you're right. I mean, 99% of comedians would not be okay for corporate. So I think it's also just remembering that it's kind of a different ballgame. I mean, there's a lot about performing for corporate groups that I really don't like, and there are a lot that I really do like. And like weighing it out, I think the upsides outweigh it because ultimately I look at it as I'm performing for the individuals, not for the company. So like I kind of have a belief that if you can bring more joy into people's lives, they're going to make better decisions for the world. I mean, that's probably a zoomed out way of having to think about it. But I think for me, magic is so special when you can bring magic to people who weren't expecting it. So like after the war in Ukraine broke out, my family we went for 2 weeks to Poland to perform for Ukrainian refugees. And so we just like went to all different places. They would be in gyms or abandoned malls. And just seeing the fact that magic could make them leave their painful realities for even a second was just like such an incredible feeling that's not parallel to anything that you would experience, you know, when you're at a banking convention. But the excitement and awe and childlike wonder, just kind of like cold reading, is a thing that can be shared and is shared. So that's that. But I got off topic. We were talking about who we picked for the roster. So with the roster, so especially with corporate, there's a lot of different possible needs. So there's like an MC need. That means that needs to be someone who doesn't need a lot of time to establish their character, can come out and do a few contained bits that start and wrap up in potentially 2 minutes, potentially 10 minutes, can carry the flow of the meeting, kind of has the confidence. So that's going to be one direction. Then you can have the stage magician, for the most part, is going to be a really, really strong magician who's also going to never offend anyone. So that's an area in corporate that you lose a little bit of your ability to kind of like fully lean into being you, because you do need to focus on the fact that like there is an intention, there is a reason for this meeting, and often we'll be asked to incorporate the messaging. So making sure that whoever it is, I mean, to do it, you change the word loyalty to teamwork to whatever. But
synergy, cycle back.
Exactly. Well, this is what happens when we work together. Well, this is what happens when we innovate. Like, you can do it the same, but you just need to be able to kind of be turned into that. But that's one place where I think, at like a magic convention, the quality of the magic leads so much. I mean, the little intricacies, the personality is really what. So if anyone was looking to do corporate or move more into corporate, it's just about having a really relatable personality. We really want it so that anybody performing, the takeaway is I want to grab a beer with that person. So it's not who was that wizard, who was that. So it tends to be kind of staying away from anything that's gimmicky, anything that's too magic-y. We kind of want it to be a magician who could also be somebody that worked for the company, but instead actually happens to be a magician.
Okay.
Which I don't always think is equated to being the most creative, the most whatever. So I also just want to clarify, because I do think there are a lot of magicians who we've said, aren't quite right for the roster, whatever. And it's not indicative at all of quality of performer. It's just indicative of knowing what corporate groups are looking for.
Okay. Oh, what kind of events does Magicorp provide? Like what?
So
I don't know how to say it right.
corporate is like 99% of it. We really kind of stay in that lane, because by moving too far out of it, then you're kind of imposing on other things. I've kind of taken on a couple of different directions that I'm currently in the works of, so I'm not going to talk about it right now, but I have like a few different directions where I'm really excited about being able to source magicians, both for either a longer period of time, like an extended stay, or for more one-offs in another market. I'm doing a trade show in a couple weeks to promote that, but I think the corporate is so much the bread and butter for so many reasons. I mean, one of the obvious is it's great financially. It's silly, but whatever we charge is a rounding error for them. So even if it feels, and that's what's kind of can be hard too, when you're kind of quoting somebody when they're like, "Can you do my party?" And you're like, these rates sound like nothing to these guys. I mean, I have separate rates. If I want to do something, right. If I have somebody that wants to do magic and I want to make it work, I'll make it work. But not so with corporate. But I think that's obviously a really big benefit. It's all my favorite benefit is that I'm in bed by 8. It's corporate events end at 6.
Yeah, that's really good.
Dinner, you do some magic, and you're in bed with your whatever food you stole from the event in your bed.
Yeah, about how long is a corporate event?
So that's what's crazy is like it can be so different, and we don't ever book by the hour, by the amount of time, anything like that. We always book, you have it for the night. So if you want me there doing walk around for 30 minutes, I'm there. It's going to be the same price as if you want me doing walk around for an hour and then a stage show. Like those are the same, because I have to come there and take that night, and I can't use it for anything else.
If they don't, if the company doesn't know, they just know they want something. How do you walk them through the different options of what they should do?
I think it starts with, we start at what is the event. So if it's a cocktail party or something like that, we're always going to try to talk them into close up. We're going to always try to talk them into walk around, because the goal of the cocktail hour is kind of taking into consideration what is the goal of that meeting or that thing, helps us kind of make the direction. Because when you have a cocktail party, really what you want to do is bring people together, give them something to talk about. There's a lot of awkwardness often in people that aren't that socially viable. Always the first people at a walk around event are always the worst. I mean, you will get no reactions from them because they're the people that showed up on time, which great if you do, but they're never the coolest. I'm always on time, so like I'm grouping myself in on that. But so we will try to steer them. So if somebody said we're having a cocktail party, we want you to do a stage show, we will very much try to talk them in the direction of what we know, because if it isn't successful, that does come back to us, even if it's what the event planner wanted. So kind of starting with that is tell us more about what your event looks like, and let's figure out where we can incorporate magic. And I think the only times we kind of push it in directions that aren't what they brought up is, one, if we think it's just the dynamics different and for some reason they don't see it, or if we see an opportunity such as they're doing an auction, and like we have magicians who have auctioneer experience. So figuring out where we can kind of incorporate it, but the corporate, I mean, I've done 6 hours of walk around, and I've done 30 minutes of walk around, and you show up at those 30-minute ones and you do it, and you're like, so that was it? We're done? And you're like, I mean, it is. And it's really weird, but it is.
What's the craziest thing that's happened to you at a corporate event that you can talk about?
Yeah, there's different.
Yeah, you got to be able to talk about it.
I mean, I don't know, craziest, probably like the most cringe was I
Mm.
was doing an event in Cincinnati, and it was like a black tie gala. Everybody is in their fanciest. And this was like people were donating lots of money for this. I mean, it was tickets, I think, were 2,000 a seat at least. And so they're doing all of their things. They've gone through the auction and they come out and they say, hey, we want to show you some of our people who have benefited from this. Oh, actually, I have one more that might be more cringe, but I'll do both.
Yeah, I want them all.
Okay. So they were like, we're going to do a live fundraising right now. So up on this screen right here, we're going to try to get to $250,000. So on everybody on your table, there's a QR code you can scan. You can make a donation. And so up on the screen, everybody's name is popping up with how much they donated. So you're feeling this weird peer pressure of all the people around you seeing what they're donating. And the number is going up and up. And they have these kids on stage with this really crappy pottery they've made. Like, you know, the like really bad painted like kid stuff. Like,
Yes.
if you donate like 10,000, you get this. It's like, okay, we're now pandering. But it was they're standing there. Like you're like, can you please donate like to save my like pancreas? And so they're sitting there and suddenly it jumps from 234,000 to 734,000. And we all just kind of look around like, what just happened? And kind of some of the people were like, well, sometimes people will leave their estate to it, so maybe this was like a dramatic way. And so the lady on stage is like, you have no idea how much this is going to help kids. This is incredible. Somebody bought this. Like they start naming things that they can buy with this money. And then one of the people runs up and they're like, they meant to put 5,000, but it entered as 500,000. And so you just see all of these faces drop. So these people, not only did they like donate $5,000, which is incredibly generous, but they also have like the worst shame hangover ever. So it's like the next day you come home feeling like an absolute doofus and you're $5,000 poorer. So that sucked. But it was funny to be standing in the back of the room for. I will say, I think some of the corporate issue is like, there can be some tone deafness, obviously. I mean, a lot of it is pomp and circumstance, but I think I was doing an event at the Four Seasons Inn, and it was to celebrate investments in affordable housing. And they were doing a week stay with at a group rate, like there's no way, like the rooms are still $1,000. So you're putting up like 250 people for a week at the Four Seasons for $1,000, putting on an event to celebrate affordable housing. And they had a woman come up on the grand lawn overlooking the ocean to like who had experienced the affordable housing to come and talk about how grateful she was to that. And I was just like, this is the most toned. I'm like, do you know how many houses or whatever could be built with like the amount that you spent this week? So that to me just like always sticks out in like cringe.
Yeah, that's why there's some other corporate magicians I've talked to. They really enjoy it. The hours are great.
It's great. And it's great because it allows like the room to kind of be more playful with your other magic and kind of things. Like if I try something and it doesn't work, I know that it's not really impacting my ability to pay my rent. So that definitely gives me a lot of freedom to mess up a lot, which is something that I was actually talking to a friend the other day. And I'm so lucky to have been raised around all of the people that I have, and I never really had the opportunity to be bad. Because I was at that high level. I didn't want feedback from all of them. And yeah, I just didn't have the space. And I think that's a little bit of what stand-up gave me, was like the space to flop without anybody who I possibly knew seeing it.
Oh, what was your style of comedy?
I mean, so much of it was crowd work.
Mm.
Very dry, I think. I mean, I've a New York Jew sense of humor. But I think when I started integrating magic, I have a friend, Harrison Greenbaum. He's a stand-up and magician in the city, in New York. And he had told me early on that he would write his comedy and then figure out how magic would fit into it, rather than vice versa. And I think that really was significant, not in that I write jokes, because I mean, I've I've tried to script things before, and I can't sell anything that sounds scripted. Like I'd be a terrible actor. I was
I understand that. That's the
like,
same way I feel. I have a hard time writing stuff down.
and it sounds. I don't know how to sound genuine when it's written. And so I think the so kind of the figuring out the kinds of jokes and directions you want to go in, and figuring out how does the trick work in. And I do think that pretty much any trick you can affect the messaging to be whatever you want. I mean, I think there are very few tricks that we can't end up in teamwork or community, I mean, wherever you want it to end up.
But is there anything that stands out to you that you learn from some of, such heavy hitters that you grew up around?
Be yourself doing magic rather than putting on a magician act. I see so many magicians, and I was talking to a young magician the other day, just kind of almost switch voices. It's like, okay, hey, I'm Dana. So now we're gonna, you're like, just talk like you normally talk and do a magic trick. And so I think the incorporating it more casually is what I think the really successful magicians can and do. Just don't act too self-important, which I think is a really, really big pitfall for a lot of magicians.
What do you envision for the future of magic and entertainment?
So this is interesting. Yeah, I like that question. There's a great calculator trick that so many people do. I do it all the time. I love it. It ends up with a number that for me it matches date and time. It can end up in different ways. And 3 years ago, that trick was the one that everybody wanted to see over and over and over. And I remember predicting then that there was going to be a shift for that, because as much as it's incredible, we all understand that technology is kind of incredible. So as much as we don't know how it's done, we are able to make the mental leap that technology is pretty insane. So I really think that across all platforms, I mean, every job, everything, it's really going to be the things that demonstrate humanity that kind of survive. So I think the more that people infuse humanity and their interpersonal and don't just like go through the moves, but also I think we're going to see kind of like more focus on the people that have really great handling and stuff like that. Like I've found that really simple sleight of hand, I always start with one trick that's just 3 cards, and it's just a series of moves, but it's just to be just to demonstrate that there's really nothing else that could be happening. And I think that I've seen such a shift over the last few years of how much people appreciate the things that are really more skill-based than conceptually they can't understand. And I think again, the more personality infused, that's what people are looking for at this point, because we have so much.
Yeah.
Everyone feels lonely. Everyone feels confused and sad. And so the more that people can see themselves in you, and you can use that magic to empower people. When I do kind of programs, I always bring pendulums, because it's a way of demonstrating the strength of our own minds. And I think that I always say, I don't want to be a figure that it's like, I'm magical and you're not. It's like, no, magic is my version and you have your version, and we all need to share our versions. And so, I mean, I mess with the audience a lot, and I think that's what kind of gets me.
Love it.
So I think that back to what you were saying of what will be the shift in the future is the things that make people feel more connected to each other. And if we can facilitate that for the other people and make it not as much about us. I mean, one of my favorite things ever to do is, I don't know how much you perform, but when you're doing walk around, there's always at least 1 or 2 people who are just like follow you all night.
All right. For anyone interested in magic, whether they want to perform or simply enjoy, any last words of advice or encouragement?
I mean, I think overall, we're seeing some really great shifts in magic from what a lot of the traditional forms are. But I think there's still a lot of focus on the right and wrong ways to do things. And a lot of it is perpetuated by a lot of the older figures in magic. And sometimes it feels like a little bit of a way to kind of hold on to it and keep it for themselves. because there is a lot of magic that takes a lot of handling and is really great. And that tends to be the things we learn first. I mean, we learn cups and balls and stuff like that. And those aren't particularly easy tricks. And if you master them, I mean, they can take an incredible amount of skill. And kind of remembering that those tricks are amazing. But if you find some tricks that get a great reaction and aren't as hard, that doesn't make them any less of an incredible trick. And so taking the time to work on the tricks that are harder that you really want to work with, but then also mixing in tricks that don't take a lot of thinking, because those are the tricks where you're going to find your own voice. Because if you don't have to think about the movements and the tricks, that's when you get the opportunity to create bonds with the people and find jokes and find opportunities for that. Whereas when we're only focused on really complicated handling, you're not going to be able to really engage with the audience because it's all focused there. So I think, one, for people getting into it, if you hear that's not how it's done, like, bleh, don't listen. just annoying, and it's from somebody that doesn't like that people are doing it another way, because that's not a thing. And that the classics in magic are great, and it's important to learn all of the history and the classics. And if a magic trick is good and it works, the difficulty kind of is secondary.
Yes, you're right. But like about, you don't have to do crazy knuckle busters to have a great show.
I think all of those classics are super important and stuff, but I don't think that they should be enough to keep you from getting out there and performing. And I think it's great to pair the really complicated stuff with the less complicated stuff. I mean, there's the trick with like a 3.5 card, right? To me, it's so silly.
So good.
But I mean, the way that I pose it, I just say, so being a magician, most people have seen a magician find their card. Most people haven't seen a magician find half their card. And I've already made the 3.5 prediction. To me, that's a really silly and kind of stupid trick. And yet, the reactions are just as good as when I do a really complicated slice. So, to me, it can feel like little, like, do you know how much work that one took? Yeah. But, like, they walk away being like, but how did you have a half on your card? And you're like, printing?
It's so good, though. Dana Herz, thank you so much for coming on with us. I learned a ton, and thank you so much for sharing your life and your work with us. Tell the people where they can find you.
So I make it hard to find me intentionally, not to be elusive, just to have something for myself. I do have a website, danaherzproductions.com. But follow me on Instagram, Dana Herz with 3 Z's, and we can bring magic into literally any event. That's probably my strength, is finding a way to incorporate magic into more things than you would ever want or need.
Sounds amazing. We will definitely do that. Thank you so much. And thank you so much. This has been Magician's Workshop.